Hello and welcome back to Karma Stories. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today, I want to skip over all the stuff we normally do and just jump right into the stories. No intros, no nothing. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from I Don't Want to Sign In, Clocking In. Used to work for a business office some ages ago. You clocked in by swiping a card on a time clock in the elevator lobby. Swipe out and in for lunch, etc. Pretty simple. You were paid in 3-minute increments, and so some people would come up a bit short or long with overtime by the end of the week. The reader machines took ages to register, so you had to stand there to be 100% certain you were clocked in or out. There could be very long queues. If you got more than an hour of overtime, you might get a talking to, but most of the time nobody said anything. Managers were also pretty chill about letting you come in whenever, as long as you were at your desk during hours where they let you call the patients. Then one day this mandate comes out, absolutely no overtime without VP approval. For the most part, nothing bad happens, except now managers have to be on your case if you're clocking in early and out late, and racking 30 plus minutes of overtime on any check. After a few months of people being no more particular about clocking in or out, a new directive comes down the pipe. No schedule changes whatsoever. Everyone is assigned a schedule and will stick to it for life. You must clock between 6 minutes before your start, no later than 3 minutes after. Flip that on the way out, 3 minutes early up to 6 minutes late. About 30 people started at 9 a.m., and so they would be queued at the punch clocks beginning at 8:54, and 2 to 3 of them would be tardy. I was one of the rare few that was allowed to be in at an abnormal time, 7:30, and didn't have to queue to punch in or out. I know math, and so do you. We've all got time to maliciously comply. 12 extra minutes, 4 days a week is 48 minutes. Then clocking in 6 minutes early on Friday gets you up to 54 minutes. Every Friday around 10 in the morning for almost 3 years, my manager walks over and orders me to clock out an hour early so that I will not get overtime. Every Friday she tells me, "You really can't be doing this," and every Friday I ask her if there's a new company policy, which always garners a sigh as she walks away. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called UsedFlatworm6633. It says, "Worked retail in the 90s, same experience. I'd be sent home every Saturday after working half the day. No overtime, no problem." I've mentioned in the past couple of videos that I worked in a few places where they would try to give you time off in lieu of overtime. And in some of those places, you would just never get that time off because there'd be way too much work to do on the other days, and the boss, usually Rick, would say, "I need you here, you can't leave, sorry." Ugh, screw you, Rick. This story comes to us from Regex is Easy. Cool, embarrass yourself the perfect way. Used to work in a startup as the lead developer managing a team of 8. I had this manager, calling him B from now, who had this long history of jealousy, and in any occasion, used to mention he used to be a programmer in his youth as well, and he knows much better than everyone. Believe me, he was a 50-year-old kid. At some point, our company got a project from one of the banks, with deadline of 2 months. The project was somehow complex mathematically, but doable in 2 months with right choice of people and planning. I was explaining this in a mutual meeting with B and the CEO, when B jumped in to speak. "This is a serious project. Unlike other projects you're in charge of, I will manage this project personally and will hire new teams reporting directly to me. It's better if you do not get involved in such a serious project." Thing is, I had a successful experience in rich mathematical projects, and CEO got that project exactly because of its similarity with our other project, which involves some mathematics. I exactly knew what must be done there, but B, it was the best opportunity for him to embarrass himself. Perfect. I'll focus on our own products then, and you take charge of this project, I told to B in front of the CEO. B started interviews and asked me to participate. I helped him a bit, but it was a challenge for him to accept people I rejected just because they answered nonsense questions asked by him. Like, how many doors did you see coming to our floor? What was the color of the third door? Like, really? The project started, and after 1 month not hearing anything from them, I had a request from B. My team has done everything, but we need a little help. Can you give us these APIs to return some data? Told him to let me see our plannings to see if I can dedicate time for this. Then sent him a letter in our system like this. As per our discussion, our team can deliver the APIs in a short time. We just need you to respond to this letter with a short description of inputs and expected outputs of whatever API you need. It doesn't need to be lengthy, so we are ready to start as soon as we get the documents. No response was given, and I forgot about it until next month, when the deadline had been passed by a week. While shopping at a weekend night, I received a call from the CEO with the angriest tone I had ever heard, screaming, "Why haven't you given B the APIs? The project can no longer wait, and B says your team failed to give them what you promised." I responded, "Look, stop screaming and give me 5 minutes, and then you can do whatever is needed." "Okay, tell me." Search for this letter in the system from me to B at that time range. Open it, and then I'll continue. Found it. So B requested this last month. All he had to do was respond to this letter in 10 minutes, and I could have given him whatever he needed. But not only he didn't, he never again mentioned it in person as well. Got it. We'll call you back soon. 1 hour later, I called again to see why he didn't call me. CEO responded with, he and his team didn't do anything except some mock-ups for the bank. Not a single line of back-end code was written, and they were looking for a victim to blame. He didn't respond to you because he couldn't write. They need all the back-end to be fully implemented by you. Due to friendship B had with the CEO, he wasn't immediately fired, but next month he left the company on his own. During that month, his team was merged into my team. They were good people, despite previously being rejected by me. Just, they were not suitable for a 2-month deadline project. And I got the role of him right after. Still one of my best stories so far. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called KCL67. It says, he effed around and found out. Sometimes the only way you can show that someone doesn't know what they are doing is to let them show it themselves. Another commenter down below called Equivalent Salary 357 said, a good manager doesn't need to be able to do the work, just to facilitate the work of the team and then stand out of their way. B failed that. A really good manager surrounds themselves with people that they think are smarter than them, people who can get the various parts of the job done, even if the manager doesn't know how to do them themselves, but has an understanding of how things work. Unfortunately, way too many managers out there bite off more than they can chew, tell people they can do things that they can't, and then just get screwed in the end when they aren't able to deliver. That's what happened to OP's boss, and that's what happens to a lot of bosses. RIP. This story comes to us from Zach in St. Louis, a coffee experience I witnessed firsthand. So I served 20 years in the Air Force, and this story is from 1996. We were an atypical unit where our mission was always deployed. Not airframe related at all, but rather like the Army. We all trained with multiple pew-pews. We trained in convoy protocols. We set up our equipment and covered it all with camouflage netting. We dug our own foxholes. We pulled our own security, etc. You get the idea. All of this was as a self-supporting unit, all designed to be operated outside any base if need be. We had about 250 people at any given time, and like any unit, not everyone took it seriously. This story happened on the first 3 days of a deployment to Denmark for a NATO Partnership for Peace exercise, which meant a 2-day convoy from our base. I didn't participate directly, but I heard firsthand from those who did as it was happening, and heard and saw the fallout, which wasn't severe, but it was very satisfying for myself. I worked radar maintenance, and after all hands went on deck for our equipment setup on a cliff overlooking the North Sea, we split into 2 12-hour shifts for the rest of the deployment. I had known Andrew, a senior airman, who outranked me since we were both in technical school 3 years prior, and this assignment was our second assignment, and it was nice to have a friend in the new unit, especially since it was my first deployment. We were both on night shift, as was Andrew's girlfriend and future wife, Katie. Katie wasn't in our work center, but whenever Andrew and Katie had free time, they were together. We came off shift and hit breakfast, and Katie was complaining about getting reamed at shift change. Now, Katie's supervisor was a somewhat crusty master sergeant, and apparently he expected coffee to be ready by the time he arrived. Now, most of us in the service love coffee. We need coffee. The 6 of us working nights in our work center went through 1.5 30-cup percolators a night. Like, if you ever read a Jack Reacher book, his coffee preference was exactly what it was like. The problem was, Katie and the one coworker she had on nights didn't drink coffee, so they didn't think of making it, and they also didn't think they should have to make coffee for someone else when they got zero benefit. So that first breakfast after our night shifts began, they decided they would maliciously comply with the Master Sergeant's order to have coffee ready when he came on shift. The next night, they intentionally used the amount of coffee for a standard drip pot you'd use at home, despite every work center having the same 30-cup percolators. So when shift change happened, the first thing the Master Sergeant said was, "You better have coffee ready," and they both nodded and gave a yes sir and walked out the door, knowing they had made the weakest brown water tea that would be considered undrinkable, and it would take another 15 minutes of anger-induced waiting by the Master Sergeant to have a decent cup of joe that he'd still have to make himself. Both Andrew and I were laughing when they relayed this to us at breakfast. That afternoon at shift change, the Master Sergeant tore into Katie and her coworker, and she came over to vent to Andrew as soon as he was off shift. Apparently, he raged about half of his 12-hour shift because a couple different people on day shift told Katie how angry and grumpy he was. Well, Katie told us he yelled loud enough that others came to see if there was a fight once she told him they weren't coffee drinkers, so they didn't know how to use a percolator. He ended his second reaming with, "Figure it out," and stomped off. After venting and a hug and kiss from Andrew, Katie said she'd make him a stronger pot of coffee, with a much different smile than her normal one. It didn't look sarcastic, but it was twice as big as normal, and I realized she was going to enjoy what she was going to do. So she went and filled the percolator basket to the brim with coffee and turned it on. This was the beginning of a 12-hour shift, and as soon as it finished, she unplugged it and took it outside, and took the top off to cool in the chilly North Sea nighttime air. Once it was at room temperature, she refilled the basket to the brim, put the lid on, and took it inside to restart the percolator using the coffee that was already in it. She got 4 cycles in that night in between her duties, which were minimal as her system was rather new and much less labor intensive than ours, and we were using our night shift to train us new guys, so we had much less free time. Andrew and I found ourselves outside at shift change on purpose. We found a way to make ourselves busy and let the others do the shift briefing. About a minute or two after the Master Sergeant arrived, you could hear the faint shouting from across the dirt road and patch of field that separated our work center from the rest of the squadron. 2 minutes later, Katie and her coworker walked out with their heads down, and after about 20 paces, turned to see if anyone was still watching. Then they started laughing hard enough to notice from just their silhouettes in the morning sun rising behind them. Katie came running to us, and I stepped back and let her tell Andrew the story, which her coworker again relayed to me at breakfast. Here it is, still etched in my mind nearly 30 years later. The Master Sergeant practically kicked in the door to the 580 shelter that functioned as their mobile work center. He immediately went to the coffee pot and scowled, "This better be stronger than yesterday." Katie just replied, "It should be," and turned to walk out before being angrily told, "Wait." She was actually happy that he was already mad. He took a styrofoam cup and poured a dark black cup of coffee that looked like motor oil pouring out of an engine block that was several thousand miles past due for its change. It even had a faint burnt smell. He let out a "What's this?" and took a sip and turned and sputtered it out of his mouth, out the still open door of the shelter. Well, most of it went out the door, but some dribbled out and hit his uniform shirt and pants. Good thing brown is one of the woodland camouflage colors. He raged for half a minute and stomped back and opened the coffee percolator to see the grounds practically overflowing in the basket. He raged some more about wasting resources and ordered them out of his sight before he could do something he'd regret. After they walked out the door, he took his cup to toss out the undrinkable coffee and raged again at the amount of grounds at the bottom. And he still had to wait another 15 minutes to get a drinkable cup of joe. We were all outside the exercise wire before he could enjoy it. Well, Andrew and I were back outside as soon as the shift briefing ended that afternoon, waiting for Katie to come share the full fallout. Apparently, the master sergeant dropped the coffee percolator trying to empty it and was so mad he didn't speak the rest of his shift until the afternoon shift change briefing. But he told Katie and her coworker not to bother making coffee. She said good thing, because she had a fiber laxative she was going to put in the pot if she had to make it one more time. She said it with that same smile she had the first morning that made me decide I didn't want to get on her bad side. They all made up about it later, and the master sergeant even laughed about it during the post-deployment barbecue the night before we packed up to convoy home. Katie made sure she kept his beer stein full all night though, so it probably helped his mood. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Tremenda Carucha. It says, I've got to hand it to Katie. Who needs an espresso machine when you can have a coffee that's strong enough to stand your spoon up in? I think this is the reason why a lot of places have gone over to the K-Cup system because, yeah, it's got a lot of waste and it's not very environmentally friendly, but you can't really mess up putting a K-Cup in, adding water, and pressing a button. This story comes to us from Old Man Chubbs. Here's one that has probably never been heard. Years ago, I worked for a suburban police department, fairly small but average size for my state. Many people suspect that these smaller towns generate revenue off of tickets and citations, and that is generally true. My boss, the chief, was in his heyday, a go-getter, loved writing tickets, and therefore expected us to follow suit. I was a patrol supervisor, a sergeant, so I was expected to set the standard for the others to follow. One month, I'd been called in and counseled about my low stats. In other words, I wasn't writing enough tickets. Legally, they cannot tell a police officer to write tickets, and quotas are illegal, but your overall contacts, which include citations, written warnings, and arrests, can be used as a metric to judge performance. Mine were low, typically 20-ish tickets and warnings in an agency where most were writing 70 to 150 tickets a month. I didn't sign up to be a revenue generator though, and it didn't sit well with me to have to make someone decide between paying a stupid ticket for a broken headlight or feeding their family. Anyway, I was told that I needed to improve my contacts. Yes sir was my response, knowing that he meant write more tickets, but couldn't tell me to write more tickets. So my contacts improved. Every single person I stopped that month, which if memory serves was around 40, got a written warning. No tickets, no revenue generated. The following month, after our stats had been compiled and posted on the wall of shame for all to see, I was called back into his office. You wrote 40 warnings last month and no tickets, he said. Yes sir, that sounds about right, I replied. And none of those deserved a ticket? Well, I used officer discretion, and in my opinion, none of them did. He was angry by this point and told me he knew the game I was playing. I'm not playing a game, I told him. You said my contacts needed to improve, so are they or are they not improved over the previous month? Oh yeah, they improved alright, you smart butt, he said. That was the last time I was hounded about stupid stats or contacts. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have another comment from Tremenda Carucha. It says, kudos to you, Sergeant. That was brave and right. There are so many comments online, especially on Reddit, about people who absolutely hate police officers. And I do have to say, it's not all police officers that are the problem. There are definitely some police officers that are a massive problem, but it's not all of them. We can't put them all in that same bucket. OP in this story seems to be one of the good ones. They didn't want to give people tickets just for the sake of giving them tickets, so they gave them warnings and let them go on their way. That's the kind of officer that other ones should aspire to be. Alright, we'll end this one here. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform. And if you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really does help us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.